Hello everyone, I'm John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and I watched a bunch of films the past couple of days, and one of those films was Wonder Woman 1984, a film I have been looking forward to seeing for quite some time, ever since I saw the first trailer. I really enjoyed the first Wonder Woman film, and who's seen a couple of my other videos knows that I'm in general a fan of the DC movies, yes, also Justice League and Batman v Superman, yes, judge me, I like them. And yeah, I finally managed to watch Wonder Woman 1984, and I thought I'd give you my personal thoughts on it, since there has been quite a lot of discussion going on about this film already, which honestly surprised me before watching the film, and also now after having seen it. So yeah, I'm just going to tell you what I thought. I'm going to keep it as spoiler free as possible. Obviously, if I should go into spoilers, don't worry, I'll give you a warning beforehand, but for now, let's jump right in. So, Wonder Woman 1984, as the title says, is set in the 80s, so a couple of years after the first one. Wonder Woman is more or less undercover, does sort of her own thing, is still very much upset and depressed about Steve dying in the first film. And in this second installment, we have a magic MacGuffin. It's basically a magic stone that makes wishes come true. And a bunch of people basically wish for stuff. Wonder Woman wishes for Steve to come back, and he does, as a weird body swap ghost person. We're going to talk about that one. And then we have, of course, Barbara, aka Cheetah, who later becomes Cheetah, who is sort of an awkward loner person who wishes to be more like Diana, like Wonder Woman, and gains a couple of cool abilities from that. And we also have Maxwell Lord, who is our villain for this evening, who basically becomes sort of the wishing stone and uses its power to gain control over essentially the world, as you can probably imagine. And hijinks ensue from all this wishing nonsense, since it's very much a monkey's paw situation, and they're trying to figure out how they can reverse those wishes, or at least, stop the villains who abuse the power of that magic stone. Okay, so I said in the beginning that this movie has already stirred up quite some talk and controversy to a certain degree, and I have to admit that to a certain degree, I absolutely get it. This movie is by no means perfect, it's by no means as good as the first one, but then again, I'm not really agreeing with those people who say this is like the worst superhero movie ever. Like, are we really saying that this new Wonder Woman film is worse than, I don't know, Justice League or Batman v Superman? Two films that I liked, but that people have also said are the worst comic book films ever, or worse than Suicide Squad? Are we really going, really? If you think about really, is this new Wonder Woman film that bad if you think about it? Because I personally really don't think so. It's, like I said, by no means a fantastic movie. So, it is, in my opinion, okay. It is entertaining enough. It just does its thing. I like most of the acting by the main cast that we get in the series. Gal Gadot is still wonderful as Wonder Woman, I think. I also enjoyed Kristen Wiig as Barbara, even though she does sort of her Kristen Wiig shtick, but I don't know, I sort of really liked the character and how it worked. Pedro Pascal is having an absolute blast as the villain, and you can just see that he's really enjoying the sort of cheesiness, over the top villainy he has to play, which is a lot of fun to watch, honestly. And the action scenes I also enjoyed for the most part. There's some really creative fighting choreography going on. Wonder Woman uses her lasso of truth a lot in this film, which is used to a very interesting, in very interesting ways. I think, even though sure I sort of miss the Shield and the Sword at times, but they're coming up with some new stuff. They're not just rehashing all of the action ideas from the last film. The story is, sure, maybe the story is nothing to write home about, but it's also really not that bad. It's really just, if you have to complain about it, you could just say it's very standard. It's all very standard. There aren't any like huge surprises. I sort of like where they go with the villain by the end of the film without giving away any spoilers, but I sort of like where it goes in the end. That they also try to humanize him a little bit, which is sure is a bit of a weak attempt the way they do it, but I don't know. I think it kind of worked. And like I said, I for the most part really enjoyed like Barbara Cheetah's character, even though also to a certain degree sort of stereotype. She's that loner woman who no one pays any attention to, who everyone always forgets about, who's not very attractive or charismatic or anything like that, and it's just generally very awkward. And wishes to basically become a more attractive, better version of herself, and then she gets all the attention from the men, she's able to defend herself, gets greater power, but with those powers, slowly her humanity vanishes, that sort of thing. But I think, in general, you can watch this film and just, I don't know, just sit there and watch for 2.5 hours and don't think about anything. Granted, 2.5 hours sounds very long, and the film probably could have done with like 20 minutes less screen time. It does feel a bit long in a few places. And I know a couple of people have complained about, the dialogue, which admittedly in some places is very basic, and you wouldn't expect that kind of dialogue if you've seen the first one. But it's nothing like, it's not that bad. It like takes you out of the immersion of watching the film, and some of the dialogue still sort of works because it's very well acted. I've seen a couple of people complain about some, without spoiling too much, but some more emotional, intimate conversations between Wonder Woman and Steve, especially towards the second half of the film, which some people have said is very bland and doesn't really work, but I thought it actually worked rather well, just because it's acted in a natural way, I thought. And with some of those dialogues, you're thinking, yeah, they sound very basic, but to a certain degree, they are also just meant to be either very basic conversations that just happen every day. Also, I think to a certain degree, the film tries to evoke, these 1980s as cliche or cheesiness, not really cringiness, but sort of cheesiness, campiness to a certain degree, which I don't know. For me, works. The film also doesn't lean as heavily into the 80s as you might expect it. It sort of sets the tone early on, so okay, this is the 80s, but then it doesn't like throw them in your face, which I honestly think is alright, because for some reason the 80s have been very, very popular in movies the past couple of years, and I'm actually enjoying the fact that it's just using the 80s as its setting, but it doesn't like throw the 80s fashion-wise, style-wise, song-wise into my face. I'm fine with that. I know that some people have complained in regards to, for example, the character Cheetah, how much screen time she actually gets as Cheetah. But then again, the film also serves as an origin story for that character. I really like how much time we actually spend with Barbara, since it sort of contrasts her story with Diana's story. And I really, really like that, because I felt like I could understand what Barbara was going through, and I didn't really feel like she was a villain. Like, not like a cliche villain, at least not until like maybe the last third of the film, because they also like to make the effort to partner Diana and Barbara together for a large chunk of the film, which I thought works really, really well. So in that regard, I thought her character worked. And the main villain is Maxwell Lord anyway, who, granted, is your over-the-top, cheesy villain, but then again, that's sort of what I'm here for. I'm enjoying it, because Pedro Pascal is just having a blast playing this character. It's sort of like, it's like Hugh McGregor in Birds of Prey playing Black Mask. He's just having so much fun playing the cheesy, over-the-top, stereotypical arsehole, And that's just fun. If you can tell the actor is having fun, then you're having fun just watching this character, watching how like over the top and maniac like he becomes, but you still have that part that sort of humanizes him, like they give him a son and sort of try to depict this connection throughout the film where, you know, you see that he's not full on villain, and they sort of give him an interesting, like I said, development towards the end of the film. Now, let's talk about Wonder Woman. Diana, I think, in this film is very different compared to what she was like in the first one, which I get a lot of people did not like. I also had some problems with it, but a part of me also sort of enjoyed it because we get to see a different side of Wonder Woman, because we know her to be a generally very positive person who isn't upset very easily and generally tends to be more of an optimist, I'd argue. And she's really not like that for most of the film. Here we can really see that the events in the first film have taken a toll on her. She's still in mourning in regards to Steve. She doesn't really have much of a social life. She tries to stay out of the spotlight, just tries to sort of do her own thing because she feels like she's not ready yet to love again, to be a hero again, which I think is an interesting take on her character, because like I said, it's different to what we've seen her before. Sure, she had that moment in the first one where she's very upset about seeing how bad humanity has become and how cruel people can be. But in the end, you know, she always believes in the love and the hope, etc., etc. And then she suffers this great loss when Steve dies, and she sort of goes into hiding and doesn't really know how to deal with it, because I would guess many of those feelings and events are still quite new to her, and she's never really had those kinds of events happen to her. So the Wonder Woman in this film is a little more, I'm not quite sure if melancholic is the right word. Yeah, to a certain degree melancholic, maybe even depressed, you could argue. Like, she doesn't get out much, and I think that's an interesting contrast, which I can understand is a bit of a downer, you know, because you sort of go into this thing and expect, you know, big Wonder Woman, positive thinking, all that, and it's not that, at least for most of the film, I'd argue. Of course, she becomes very happy when Steve comes back and all of that, and it's wonderful to see her back in this mode of, okay, yes, I have the person back, but, you know, you can tell that she is very much aware of the fact that magic has brought him back, and she doesn't know if she can keep him, if he can stay around. And I do get the complaint that a large part of her identity, at least in this film, is defined over the fact that she wants to stay with a man, that she defines herself or her love or her life over the love with she's had to this man, which I can understand is sort of a problem, especially in regards to, you know, thinking that Wonder Woman and especially the first film have these strong feminist messages. So I get that this is sort of a problem. I definitely agree with that. There were those moments where I wished there would be a bit more to her character, where she would be more like the classic Wonder Woman we know, where it wouldn't just be about her and her relationship to Steve, but also about her relationship, you know, to humanity, to herself, to her culture, to her powers. So I do understand where some of those complaints are coming from. I definitely get that. They sort of set an interesting theme, I think, in the very opening of the film, where it's all about, you know, truth is always the most important thing, and Diana shouldn't lie or shouldn't get to her goal via lying or you know, doing something that's not according to the rules, which is sort of a theme that plays throughout the film. And of course, sort of at the end, as we're used to with these kinds of films, we get, you know, a message from Wonder Woman without spoiling it too much what she actually does and says. And, you know, I admit that maybe it falls a bit flat. It's not as strong as some of the messages we had in the first film. But then again, it's really not as bad as everyone says. At least that's what I thought. Maybe I'm just not thinking about it too hard. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's really just, you know, your standard Wonder Woman superhero movie. which maybe suffers the sequel problem that is really not as good as the first one. Maybe also a couple of quick words about Steve, since you might have noticed I haven't talked about him at all, which is due to the fact that he doesn't do a whole lot in the film, which I admit is a bit of a problem. He doesn't do a whole lot. He, does sort of his pointed thing. I think it's sort of funny that they sort of twist around this cliche, whereas in the first film it's Wonder Woman coming into the human civilization and figuring out how that stuff works, and now it's Steve coming into the 80s and seeing how everything has changed, or sort of turning that on its head, which I thought was very, very funny. And he brings in some humor, which I think mostly works. It's not like laugh out now, gigantic funny jokes, but I don't think the movie really needs that. It's just, funny in a low-key way, where you sort of chuckle a bit, maybe occasionally. But yeah, he doesn't do a whole lot in the film. He contributes in some of the action scenes, which is fine, where you can see how Steve and Diana sort of work as a couple, not just in a romantic way, but also in a more practical way, which I think is funny. But yeah, I do agree that they could have utilized his character a bit more, to be honest. Which brings me to a heated discussion people have had about the way Steve is brought back, which I'm gonna honestly admit I did not even think about while watching the film. So this is not really a spoiler. I mean, we all know Steve is gonna come back, but the way he comes back is basically his soul, or whatever you want to call it, it comes back to life in the body of another man. So Diana sees this man as Steve, but it's actually the body of someone else. And people have pointed out that they engage in romantic actions, they probably even have sex, but they do this with the body of another man who at this point is unable to consent because it's Steve's mind in this other man's body. And like I said, I honestly did not think or consider that at all while watching the film, but I can totally see and understand where the problems are coming from in that case. The thing is, I maybe didn't think about it all because the film really doesn't portray it as a problem, which is also something a lot of people have complained about. The film really doesn't address the fact that, this is the body of another man. They sort of pointed out in the beginning where Steve is like, what about this guy? He looks nice. And she's like, oh, well, I only see you. And that's it. So maybe go watch the film for yourself to figure out how you feel about it, but just as a general warning, where I can definitely understand where some of the complaints are coming from. I definitely get that now that I think about it. And also a second thing that I was also not aware of, so I'm glad I read up on that, is that you do have some racist cliches or stereotypes in regards to, I think it's like Egyptian and Arab people, where it has something to do with the villain going to a businessman from that region, from the Egyptian region, and it's very much just a cliche of, powerful or power-hungry Egyptian Arab business people, where I have to admit I did not really consider or know about that as I was watching that scene, and only really came to know about it afterwards, after sort of looking at some articles about the film and reviews on the film, and that was pointed out. So not good that was in there. You could argue that, the film either the writers didn't know about that, which, or, since the film is set in the 80s and sort of tries to evoke 80s cliches and stereotypes to a certain degree, but then again, why revive a racist stereotype if you could just do something else? So maybe also be aware of that going into the film. But to wrap this whole thing up, I thought Wonder Woman 1984 was an absolutely okay, average superhero movie. Is it as good as the first one? No. Is it the worst superhero film? Definitely not. Like, again, do we really think this movie is worse than Suicide Squad? That a lot of people, so many people have complained about. Or like Batman v Superman that everyone still hates to this day. Or Justice League, or I don't know, Thor the Dark World. Or are we really thinking Wonder Woman 1984 is that bad that it's worse than those movies? I honestly don't think so. I would just say that this new Wonder Woman film is just average. If you want to call it anything, it's absolute average. It's maybe forgettable. Yes, it's not as memorable as the first one. But, you know, you can still watch it with your friends on an evening and have some fun with it. Like, it's not that big of a thing, I'd argue. Yeah, sure, it has problems. It's too long. Some of the dialogue is clunky. It's maybe not as inventive as the first film, and just maybe like a bit more box standard, cliche and stereotypical in some places. A bit problematic in others as well. But there are a bunch of other films that have done that as well, also in the superhero genre. And quality-wise, I think this is absolutely okay to watch and doesn't have anything that like took me out of the enjoyment. So maybe go watch the film for yourself to like get a proper opinion on it. I would argue maybe don't listen to everyone says this is the absolute worst movie that's come out in recent years in regards to the superhero genre. Because in my opinion, it's really not that bad and doesn't deserve all of the hate. I can definitely understand the problems. Believe me, I can absolutely see some of the problems. I wasn't even aware of some of the problems going into the film, so I'm glad I now know about them. But yeah, I would say go watch the film for yourself before judging it, which should be the general rule with anything, really, shouldn't it? So yeah, that's my opinion on the film. If I had to give it a score, maybe like a 6 out of 10, 6.5, 7, if I'm being generous, a 7. But, you know, in my book, that still means it's okay and it's watchable. So, do with that what you like. So, that's it for my review. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.